You're listening to the Belly Dance Geek Clubhouse at bellydancegeek.com. Hello, everybody. This is Nadira Jamal, and welcome to episode 55 of the Belly Dance Geek Clubhouse. The Clubhouse is a place where dancers can get together and geek out on all of those things that are hard to get in classes and on DVDs. So every month, I interview a different guest expert on a different topic. Because if you want help with the what, things like moves and choreography and combinations, there are a lot of resources available to you. But if you want help with the why and the how, stage presence, musicality, culture, ethics, business, all of that stuff can be a little bit harder to find. So we always include some question and answer time so you can geek out too. And if you think that knowledge and creativity go together like chocolate and peanut butter, you are in the right place. My guest tonight is Phoenix. Dynamic and dramatic, Phoenix is an acclaimed belly dance artist with a stage presence that is as unique as it is diverse. Her holistic knowledge and teaching methods focus on physical and emotional development for dancers using the chakras, elements, movement, and technique. Dedicated to sharing her knowledge, Phoenix's passion for this beautiful form of self-expression is evident in every move she makes. You can find her at phoenix-dancing.com. So welcome, Phoenix.
Hi, thanks. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. It's exciting to have you here. So everybody, tonight Phoenix is going to talk about using internal work to improve your stage presence. But before we jump into that, Phoenix, why don't you tell us your origin story? How did you get started in belly dance?
Okay. Well, I saw a belly dance class whenever I was living back on the East Coast and never had a chance to really try it. So when my husband and I moved to Colorado, I decided it was the perfect time to try out belly dancing. So it was pure curiosity. And also, it was a great way to maybe find some other ladies that were kind of like mind, wanted to go out, have fun dancing, but maybe not crazy partiers. And so I started with a local rec center pretty much and just thought I'd do a few classes, and 20 years later, I'm still doing it. But basically, pure curiosity, and I had a wonderful mentor, Joy Nan, that I joined, and she just kind of guided me and pushed me into dancing more. And then I had some friends ask me to teach, and then under her blessing and guidance, I started teaching. And then one day she calls me and says, "You should do a DVD." So I did that and just kept dancing and changed careers because of dancing. And now I do travel and teach local classes and perform and just have fun. And I just found myself leaving the IT industry and moving towards healthcare due to my dancing because I wanted to mix the idea of anatomy and all the healthcare related topics into my dancing. So that's my story. Kind of all winds and just happened to end up being where I am today. So
I think that happens with a lot of people. I've heard from more than one professional dancer who took their first belly dance class because their friend really wanted to do it and didn't want to go alone. And they were like, "Oh, fine, I'll go with you." And then the friend drops away and that person falls in love.
mhm.
All right.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, why don't you tell us about your interest in internal work? How did you get involved with that?
So I've always explored a lot of spiritual followings and religious followings, and so through that I've done various energy work and studies. But um, I need to go in and back up and mention that for about a little over a decade, I did volunteer work as a rape response counselor, and just really believed in empowering women. And a lot of the stories that I heard and what I saw just made me feel even stronger about empowerment for women. So a lot of my spiritual paths and energy work has kind of followed that path of empowerment of people. And around 12 years ago, I was doing a lot of work with the elements and on a spiritual path and realized how you could really use it to explain feelings in your body. It's not rocket science. A lot of people have thought of that and done that kind of thing. And so I started using it as descriptions for, how I was feeling. And then when I began to, teach dance, I was using it to describe moves and what the person should be trying to portray. And kind of, saying, hey, make that a little more fiery, make that a little more sensual or watery. And so just kind of lightly using the descriptions. Then I continued on in this path of using the elements and spiritual work and moved more into the meditational side of dance. And so a lot of times whenever I was really struggling personally, I would come home and just dance more of meditational, not really with any intent to create a choreography or practice, but just truly just like my yoga or like it was my meditation. And I just found how it would just change my whole outlook and how I would feel so much better and maybe help me settle whatever was going on. So, since I realized, okay, well, this is working for me, let's try it out on some of my classes. So I started using some of the elements within class, and we would kind of play with those elements and how people were feeling, and then bring that out in like what we wanted to show people, what we were feeling. And then as I got more and more excited about it, I started adding in chakra work where we'd work with, where are you at with your chakras and do kind of more meditational things with that and just kind of kept exploring it, and it continues to develop. Right now, I'm working on something new using still the chakras and the elements, but you just continue to explore and see what comes out. But most of the general path began with just again my own personal search for my own spiritual path and my own ways of dealing with my personal struggles, and then just started wanting to share that with others.
Nice. All right. Well, internal work is this huge topic, and so we decided to slice it a little finer and talk about using it specifically as a way to improve stage presence. But maybe it would help to start off by talking about what is stage presence. It's so much more than that, like it factor.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I think it could be defined many ways, but the way I define it is it's really a quality that a performer has to keep the audience attention or even captivate them, that wow factor that they don't want to take their eyes off of the person. So that's, mainly how I would define it. It's definitely more than executing a perfect routine or doing all the tricks that just pulling everything out of your hat. It's a lot more than technique, although you want all of those things. You want some cool tricks, you want technique, you want all of that. But at the same time, it's involving the musicality, the movement, the execution, and then also having a comfort on the stage and an ability to truly be present and connect with the audience. And in my personal opinion, I feel like that's really when the audience feels like, wow, I'm on stage with that performer, and I really loved that. And they begin to see and feel what the performers are allowing them to instead of feeling closed off. So I love it one day when a student said to me, "How do you do that with your face?" And at first I was kind of like, "Whoa, what did I do with my face?" And then she was like, "I couldn't stop watching you. You were just so into it and all the emotion." And I just said to her, I said, "Well, I let you in." I said, "And it's real. Like what you saw was real." And she's a very good dancer and comes from a competition background, so someone who knows, and now she is trying to work on, instead of just executing that choreography and doing the face like the choreography says to do, but truly starting to feel it and let other people feel it. So it's a comfort and an openness that I think allows the audience to be there with you. That's kind of a long description of stage presence, but what I feel it involves myself.
And, if I can just, branch off from that a little bit, I think one of the things that makes belly dance so powerful, both for the dancer and for the audience, is how personal it is supposed to be and how much it is about opening up and sharing your personal experience in this single moment with the people in front of you.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think belly dance is very, very personal, and I think that is what drew me to it, but at the same time I think that is what is a little bit of a struggle to get used to being that exposed on the stage pretty much.
Well,
And
that's a good lead
I
into my
agree.
next question, which are, what are some of the things that make stage presence hard?
Well, I would say that exposure for belly dancers especially. I think some forms of dance may not feel quite as personal. Not to say that they're necessarily easier; they have their own barriers. But in belly dance, I think one of the things is that you are kind of exposing your heart and soul to the audience, and that can feel pretty vulnerable. So I think that is one thing, and um, a lot of times I feel like that might come from a little bit of lack of confidence. Whether the person is worried about, am I doing that perfect? Am I going to mess up my choreography? So, all these things going on in their brain that can kind of distract and also make them lose their focus. So I think lack of confidence, concerns, sometimes things can be shake your focus, and then instead of just being there, your brain goes somewhere else. That's another barrier. That feeling of just being open and going, wow, I'm going to lay my heart and soul out on the floor in front of these people, and then what if they don't like it? And I think that's a huge barrier, and I think no matter how long you're dancing, that one still comes up every once. Sorry, my cat's yelling at me now. I don't know if you heard that. I've got some kitties, and I guess she wanted to interject her personal opinion on that one. But basically, I do think, too, you've also got to take the time to learn that musicality and that presentation, too. That you can learn in class, like you said, but these things of getting that comfort, that confidence, and that focus, that's a lot of personal work to do, and it's not always something that you can learn from drilling or reading a book on it or something like that. So to me, those are the barriers I ran into personally. So those are the barriers I kind of see.
Mhm. And, as people can tell from the title of this episode, internal work is a lot of what can help us get over that. But would you be willing to define that for us and tell us, what is internal work? What kinds of activities is it?
Yeah, sure, sure. So working internally is working to figure out what is in our mind, what is in our soul. Are we concerned with perfection? Has someone made us feel like we're not good enough? Do we have past experiences that are buried in our muscle memory or even in our mind? So that internal work is basically going on this self-exploration to see all these questions we've been talking about up until this point. It's like you go on this path or this exploration to see, what am I? Like, who am I? Who do I want people to see? What are my barriers? What are my struggles? What are my strengths? We're focusing on some things that are barriers, but you also want to recognize, hey, I do that really well, so I'm going to use that. So internal work, it just really involves this open honesty of exploring how you really feel, what you really portray, what people see. Even when you think you're portraying something, do they really see it? So internal work to me has to do a lot of just learning about yourself, being honest with yourself of when you're struggling and why, and then beginning to explore, okay, what's going on here? What can I do to fix it? Can I fix it? Sometimes we've just got to figure out how to deal with things, and okay, well, I have to just accept that. And so it's asking yourself a lot of hard questions and then being honest with yourself with those things. How you do that, different people choose different ways. Some might choose to meditate, some might choose to dream search, some might choose various spiritual paths to find that, but whatever works for each individual, it's that truly being honest and knowing that we're all going to have some of these struggles, and then just figuring out what yours are and what you're going to do about it.
Mhm. And why is internal work so important for artists in particular?
Well, in a nutshell, if we don't do the work on how we hold ourselves back, then we'll continue to do it. And if we have those areas that we stumble on, we'll continue to stumble. So it's a different kind of growth that learning a new than learning a new move, but it's real important to start from day one and just really focus on. So why it's important to artists is because it is a barrier that could hold you back, could hold your self-confidence back, could keep you from being present in the moment when you're on that stage and when you're trying to say something special to the audience, but you're losing your focus or you're afraid they're not going to like it. So to me, it's important to artists because it's going to help give you that honest presence on the stage to allow the audience to engage with you.
Hmm. And how can internal work help us improve our stage presence in particular?
Um, well, so let's see. I'm trying to find the right words here. You can sometimes watch someone on the stage and see them thinking, and I call it to my students. I'm probably not the only one, but I call it the thinking face. I'm like,
Yep.
there's the thinking face. You're counting. It might even be with the musicality, but that thinking is there, and so you're like, you know, instead of just being in the moment with them, they see you thinking through it. And it can still be a beautiful routine, but they didn't really see you. So I feel like that's one of the main things is it allows you to, sure, you need to practice, you need to be prepared for your routine, you need to know your routine. But guess what? We're all going to mess up. What are you going to do then? And how are you going to smoothly slip right back into that routine and continue on? Or we all have surprises. Or if you do improv like me, I do improv, you can't be seen thinking what your next move is. Am I thinking about the next move? Sure. But I don't want to show the audience that. So it is that help to help us be in that moment. The other thing is the confidence that it brings you. It kind of answers that same question. If there's a slip up, if you decide to improv, you're just like, hey, this is me, and I hope you like it. And honestly, if you don't, that's okay too. We don't all have to like everything. It's not a knee-jerk reaction, if you don't like it. It's just well, this is me, and this is what I'm going to present to you. So it adds that confidence on the stage. And honestly, I think that when you see most performers that are out there saying, hey, I'm going to lay my heart and soul out here, and I hope you like it, I think most audience really like that because they like to see that confidence. They want to see confident performers. And then also just the focus. If you can start to find on your path what distracts you from practicing, what distracts you from engaging the audience, if you find that right before a performance you start to worry about things that you shouldn't, and you find some way to work on those things, then again it helps you find that path to keep your focus, whether it's in your personal drills or whatever, or when it's on the stage, keeping your focus. So specifically, I think it helps with those barriers that we were talking about.
All right. And are there some specific techniques or types of internal work that can help us with stage presence?
Um, so there are. So I like to use a lot of visualization. So putting the performer in some various settings to work, and maybe even trying to find the one that's uncomfortable for them, so that it actually makes them start that exploration. It sounds kind of mean, but that visualization and finding, okay, what do you go to and what do you really love? And okay, well, if you really love that, how about this over here, and try that uncomfortable thing on and see how it goes. Role playing or games is another thing that I think is really fun to do. So you can do things like, it's very similar to visualization, but it's more of a game where maybe you pair up two dancers and they're mirroring each other, or they're doing various work together, or as a big group you're kind of playing off of each other, whether it's some game where you're building a dance together, or you're trying to portray something and then maybe somebody portrays something contrast, or they just try to guess what you're trying to portray. A lot of energy and element work, obviously, because that's what I'm into. So I do a lot of work with the elements, where we work with the quality of the elements and the descriptions to kind of vary your moves, but also to strengthen that confidence within your moves so that they look and feel more solid, and they feel more the way you want them to on your own body. And meditation and affirmation statements, I think, are another way that are really wonderful, especially if you've got someone that's dealing with confidence issues. The affirmation statements are really a great way to work with that. And meditation, I just think, helps you relax and kind of be in that moment at times. If you're struggling, I do know of dancers that actually meditate before performances just to kind of get in their body and be ready. So, but I think also if you've got any other dance friends, teamwork is a big one too with internal work, because a lot of times when we're having to answer to other people, then we have to be really honest, because our friends, and I'm talking about, teamwork where people want everyone to be successful. When you're saying something, then they might say back, well, I see this too, and help with that honesty and help with that work. And they may have even struggled with a very similar thing. I'm sure there's plenty of other ideas of internal work, but those are a lot of the ones that I use, and I use with my classes and my students.
Cool. Now I'm
Yeah.
wondering, could we talk through a specific example of one of those? Maybe say one of the elemental work things that you like to do.
Sure, sure. So with the elements, each one of the elements have their qualities. I mean, everyone, Earth is always very grounded, and yet at the same time, people often think of Earth as being grounded. That means you're like solid and you're not movable, but it's not really true because we move Earth. So a lot of times it's more like in that movement and versus water. People think of water, and I'm just giving you a little background so then I can explain it to you. So like water is often very sensual, and it's a lot of times it's connected with our sexuality. Yet a lot of times you say water and you're like, move like water, and you automatically see people just kind of get real fluid. Yet water can be a trickle from the sink, because it could be this just little soft trickle, or it could be a raging river. So, whenever I'm doing elemental work with people and I'm trying to get them in that mood of, okay, so you want to present something that's very sensual. So let's use the element of water. Now, how sensual do you want it to be? Do you want it to be that light little trickle moving into a flowing stream? And then, or do you want it to be like the raging river that just like barrels over people? And so we'll start to work with that quality and their movements, and they might pick, say, 4 movements. And might say, okay, stay in the element of water, and we'll kind of put that flow maybe just on a soft river flow, and we'll talk a lot about like where in your body the water is. The elements to me are found in everything, yet a lot of times they are often connected with the pelvis. So if I've got someone that's wanting to be more sensual, we might be working with a lot of pelvic movements that are very fluid, soft, flowy, and then we might change that variation. And what I see happens with someone when I have their brain there, they're not worried about, oh, I'm trying to be sexy, so I've got to look sexy. They truly start to feel it instead in their body. And then it just comes out instead of it being this forced sensuality that they're trying to present. Then it just naturally starts to flow, because in their head they're using that visualization of the quality of the element as opposed to the idea of what they think everybody in the audience expects to be sensual, if that makes sense.
Mhm. It makes a lot of sense. I teach some classes at for a university belly dance club, so I work with very young women, and
Yeah,
that's absolutely something that we try to work through. Is
right.
not
Yeah,
it's not about presenting a sexy spectacle. It's about enjoying your body and enjoying your
yes,
movements, and that could
yeah,
absolutely be sexy, but it's not about needing to offer the audience something in particular. It's about enjoying what you have and allowing them to watch.
right, exactly. And I think a lot of women. I mean, I think the area of sensuality. There are a lot of women that have been told, "Oh, that's a no-no. And it's like, no, 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 sensual, even sexy is not a no-no, because it doesn't, like you said, it's not like you're offering anything other than just pure enjoyment. And so if you're enjoying and truly enjoying, then the audience can't help but enjoy too. So doing these kind of visualizations and using the elements in that manner, I just think it takes your mind off of I've got to do this, and instead it's like, oh yeah, a river, oh yeah, and then all of a sudden, you're in pure enjoyment, and there it goes. So
Mhm. All right,
so
so we've
that's an example of one of the little exercises, and of course we can use any one of the four elements to present something different so that it's not so forced. But
Mhm.
yeah.
And if folks are not used to thinking in terms of the elements, can you tell us about the four?
Sure, sure. Say you've got the element of earth, and most of the time people see earth as that grounded, secure. You hear about the Mother Earth and the roots and the strength that comes out of the earth. And then you've got water, which is often more connected with your sensuality and your sexuality, and also who you are. And it's often connected with a lot of our emotions. So water is a very emotional element. And then you've got fire, and fire is often associated with power. So you've got the who am I, and then you've got like the power of letting other people know who you are. And so power can be something that's too little or too much. So there's that balance of fire too. So the fire energy has a lot to do with, it still can be your sexuality, your sensuality, it can be your control, but power around a lot of different things, whether it's power within your life, power in your body, power in your movement. But fire a lot of times is more associated with that control of power factor. And then air has a lot to do with our intuition and our communication with others. And it's kind of funny because back in, I'm not supposed to say my age, right? Well, anyway, back in the 80s, I would be called an airhead. That was my nickname. And, people always, thought of airhead as the clueless, spacey one, yet I was usually thinking. And that's why I missed out on what they said to me. It wasn't that I was off in space not thinking at all. It was more like they said something, it triggered my brain, and I was still exploring that topic or thinking about it. And so the element of air has a lot to do with our intuition, our communication, and our connection with others too. So there's a lot more to the elements. There's colors that can be utilized. There's stones and crystals that are associated. I don't use that as much as I do the quality, but so I go for more the qualities of these elements and how we can use those.
Mhm.
So yeah.
And, when it comes to doing internal work, what are some of the barriers? What might cause people to resist doing that or to have trouble doing it?
You mean like if they come to a workshop and they're kind of like, whoa, I didn't know I signed up for this kind of thing?
Well, that's certainly one possibility. Or if people are trying to do it on their own and having difficulties, what kinds of difficulties do those tend to be?
Oh, okay. Well, I think one is if people do want to try it, is finding their own path that's comfortable. Because I did try, some meditational paths that didn't really work for me. So I think one barrier would be find that thing that fits you. And and we're not all cookie cutter, so not everything's going to fit everybody. It's not always going to answer their calling or whatever you want to call it. So one would be finding the right fit for yourself and your brain and how you think. Another would be that sometimes it does get a little hokey, and that might turn some people off because they might be like, "Oh, I don't know about this," or feel self-conscious about exploring that. And honestly, I actually respect that because in some ways, I guess you could be like, "Oh, they're closed-minded. They're not trying it." But again, it's just it might not be them, and or it might not be the right time in their life to be doing it. There might be other things going on that they need to focus on. So on that note, also having that right time of your life and that right mindset to find it. Um, I think if people do find that and they're starting to explore and they still are running into barriers, then it could be that they're not being honest with themselves. They're hoping they go into this internal work with an idea of what their goals should be instead of asking the questions of where am I going with this or what should my goal be. They like set a goal and they're like, that's the goal I need to get to. Whereas the internal work is an exploration, so you don't necessarily know where you're going to come out on the other side. And I'm afraid a lot of times when people are trying to do this work, then they think there's an expected outcome, and sometimes that it might not be what they think, and then they're trying to make it match up or force it to fit. So distractions can be, again, that focus at home, not having enough time to do it, because it does take up time, just like drilling our moves. It's going to take up some time and some focus. Having a good little space in your home, whether that's, it doesn't matter where it is. Again, there's no expectation. It could be your living room. It could be your bedroom. It could be the bathtub if you find that soaking in the bathtub and meditating there is the right place to be. But definitely having a little space that you can kind of call it your working space. But yeah, I think probably one of the biggest things that I would hear people run into is where they're trying to do the work, but they weren't necessarily open to the answers. They thought they had to know those answers, and they thought, like, this is what it was supposed to be, and that's not what was happening. So to me, I think that's probably one of the biggest barriers once they find that right fit for themselves.
Mhm. All right. And, a couple months ago when you and I first talked about bringing this topic to the air, one of the things that you mentioned was that, a lot of this work is stuff that we, associate primarily with the New Age movement, but that people who are into that and people who are not into that can still get benefits out of it, regardless of whether it's something that you believe in for itself versus using it as a focus. Can you tell us about some of the different ways that that plays out?
Sure. Uh, let's see. So, um, so if you have somebody that's kind of not really as into the metaphysical side of things, that's what you're asking?
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So there is still that idea of using the elements, like I said before, where, like the example that I gave, where if you're just working on, hey, I want to work on this presentation of this particular energy, or I want to make sure I'm making this statement to the audience. And so you can still go through some of this work without it being this huge spiritual journey to start learning how to be honest in your presentation. And so I'll go back to the example that I was using for the water and the sensuality and the fact that those are, those are qualities that anyone can understand. They don't have to be on a spiritual journey. They can just be working with those qualities to be like, I want to truly present this. And so they just keep working with it, and then their presentation gets stronger and stronger. But it doesn't necessarily have to be this deep, dark journey within yourself when you're using qualities and various focuses or various descriptions, I should say, various descriptions to find ways to present different emotions or different statements to the audience, like if you want to give a strong statement, even things like the affirmation statements. If you're saying an affirmation statement, kind of like when you were in school and you were scolded and you had to go up to the board and write, I will not do this, I will not do this, I will not do this. Not that I ever had to do anything like that, but we might have. If you say those things enough, you do start to kind of go, yeah, I can do that. I mean what I'm saying over and over and over. And again, I think that can come out in your presentation. So it doesn't necessarily have to be this metaphysical journey. It definitely doesn't have to remove anyone from any spiritual path or religious journey they're already on. It can truly just be like, I'm going to use those statements to figure out like how to make it stronger whenever I hit the stage, and that's what I want to say to them. Or this emotion is what I want to hit the stage and portray. And so you can use it in pure practice and in drills, basically, at home and film yourself and see if you see a change. And that is how I could see someone who's not into that new age stuff as much to give it a try and see if it doesn't work for them. I would still bet it would.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and that's one thing that I feel like, a lot of kind of the new age content has that's so powerful, whether you believe it or not, is that very often a lot of the images that come up are these really kind of like universal themes and universal archetypes that make a great shorthand for things that are complicated to explain, right? You can
Yeah.
say, be like
Yeah.
water, and that means something that could take you paragraphs to describe. And so
It
often it's
really
kind of a good way to cut to
could.
the chase.
Right? And me, I start to babble. I'm like, water. Well, what quality of water are you looking for? Yeah, but you're right. It is. It's. I feel like today, what was considered new age back in the day is actually just kind of a way we describe some things now, and I don't think it's that different and way out as it used to be. I think it can be, sure, but yeah, I think that now we use a lot of descriptions that I think we didn't used to use that are just a little more fluffy. We use a lot more emotional descriptions than maybe we didn't used to use. And now it's just more the norm. So it doesn't mean that it's anything out of the ordinary or different. It's just maybe a new way of looking at it that brings a new image to mind that can help someone. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
All right. Now, I feel like one of the things that makes stage presence difficult is that there are kind of these two competing fears, right? One is I'm not like I guess they all come down to fearing that being afraid that you're not good enough, but I feel like people take two different strategies. Either they put on a mask and try to present something shiny and clean and perfect, or they try to hide from the audience. And in either way, we don't get that opening up that you were talking about earlier. So, what can we do to balance dancing from inside ourselves without shutting the audience out?
I think that's a great question. Um, it's really funny that you bring up the putting on the mask because a friend of mine and we're working on a workshop, and we literally are going to work on the whole facades. Like, what is your facade? Like, what is your mask whenever you walk on the stage? What is that shiny thing you're trying to present when really that shiny thing might just be yourself? So, again, with the mask, we'll address them separately because to me they're kind of two. Well, they're one and the same, yet they're two different things. Um, so the mask, if you're truly trying to present, and again, we're talking in belly dance, where in some forms of dance you might truly put on a mask, and that is the goal. But in belly dance, you're saying, "This is what I feel when I hear this music. This is what this piece of music is truly." If it's someone singing or a traditional piece that we know that it has meaning behind it already, this is what this piece of music is saying, and therefore I want to portray it. So it just kind of all depends on what kind of music you're using. Again, there's the over dramatized mask, and where again it's that force. So so I think doing some of this work will help you, like, just let your own emotion show as opposed to forcing the emotion. Or and then looking into the audience doesn't mean you have to make eye contact still if that makes you nervous, but more so just truly being there. And again, when you're not forcing the emotion, then the audience is often more comfortable. I feel like when we put on the mask and we're forcing the emotion, if it's something that's really strong, the audience can actually become uncomfortable. While they're not necessarily left out, they might actually be like, wow, that's too much, or too little because you're holding it back. But when you're just there in your emotion, then the audience is just kind of comfortable also. So I think one with the mask is if you're comfortable on stage, then the audience is going to be comfortable watching, and they're going to want to keep watching, and then you're going to keep kind of exchanging that comfort and that energy. With someone who's really shy and trying to hide, I mean, we all probably know oftentimes they're looking down or they're looking up, and it does have that, like, you're not supposed to be watching me kind of image, like that's shutting you out totally. Again, to me, then that comes back to the confidence there with someone that's maybe trying to hide from the audience. To me, that has to do with that question that they're even asking, am I supposed to be on the stage? And then hopefully from doing some of this work, they'll come back with the answer, yes, I'm supposed to be on the stage. And then the audience goes, and they're watching, and they're going, yes, you're supposed to be on the stage, and I'm supposed to be watching you. So again, it comes back to that when a performer is comfortable in their own body and comfortable with what they've decided to present, then they're able to just relax and allow the audience in, as opposed to looking like they're thinking and looking past the audience, which then the audience is kind of like, hey, I'm over here, why are you thinking over there? Or they're looking down at the floor going, you're not supposed to be watching me, you're not supposed to be watching me, because then the audience does think, oh, they're a little uncomfortable. So again, to me, it just comes back to that confidence and that comfort. And as soon as you have that, what happens naturally, or at least in my opinion, is you begin to look out to the audience, and your movements and your arms become a lot more open, and everything seems a lot more open, which then lets the audience know, oh, we're supposed to be watching this person. We're supposed to enjoy what they're enjoying. And then I think you might even get comfortable enough to start making eye contact, which then, of course, immediately makes people make eye contact back at you. So I feel like the whole goal of it is to get that confidence and that comfort to engage the audience, if that's what we're going for. The spiritual work side is and the internal work is not meant to be done in front of the audience. It's meant to be done at home, so that when you hit the stage and you've created this choreography, or you've decided to do this improv, and you've worked on your drills and your movements and the strength in your moves, and you've worked on your musicality, then you walk out there and everything is like this puzzle that's been put together that also includes that comfort, that focus, and that confidence that now I'm here to present to you. And so when you hit the stage as a performer, you're not still necessarily doing that work there in front of them. You're there to show them what you've been working on for all that time before you walked out. Because we all know that 4-minute number, how many hours and weeks and possibly months have we worked on some of those things that then we walk out to present. And this is just one more of those, you could call it drills or practices that you've also been doing before you hit the stage. And then you let go of it, and then you're there and you're present for them to be there and present with you.
Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds like the goal of all of this is, being comfortable opening up to the audience, but that is always easier said than done. So, if we look at these two, types of strategies, putting on the mask or hiding from the audience, let's say you're talking to a dancer who either has that problem or there's a teacher who's trying to help a student with that problem. Can you suggest one very specific thing that they could try for each of those scenarios?
For them, okay, yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
and I'm not asking you to solve the problem entirely, but what would be
I know,
one
right?
exercise or one approach that you recommend for each one?
Yeah, sure. So I will go to a particular student that I'm thinking of. I had a student that really, really loved to engage, like she wanted to engage the audience, and she had tons of confidence. Yet when she would hit the stage, she would have so much energy and so much like clapping for them and stuff. People would clap, but you kind of felt like, you were programmed in clapping for her. So what we started doing is we started working with her kind of actually softening her energy, because this facade was, I mean, her confidence was there, but the facade was, the presentation was so strong, it was just kind of a little, I think, overwhelming for the audience. So we started working with her, slowing down the movements, because that was her nervousness coming out. She was confident with being out there, but she would get so nervous. That's where the bigger than life energy would kind of happen. We started working on her slowing down, not trying to do so much in her dance. And a lot of that came from deciding, okay, what exactly are you trying to portray? Because when you get out there, it's a little confusing. There's so much going on, and you've got this like mask or this facade of this kind of like rushed energy. And it's like, let's pick one. Let's pick one emotion, and let's focus on that, and that's where you're going to stay for the whole song. Not that you always have to, but for this is exercise you're going to do, because it helps slow her down. And then as she slowed down, then she realized she wasn't taking the time to enjoy her own movements. And so we worked on this idea of make sure you're enjoying it, because if you're enjoying it, then they're going to engage. And then whenever she would do things like want the audience to clap for her, it was a lot more relaxed instead of forced and like almost, I mean, she never did do this. I don't want to make it sound like that. But it almost would look like she was ready to yell out, clap for me, clap with me. And but then it was just like natural. And she just started relaxing and slowing down. And that idea of this big presentation kind of just helped her slow herself, slow her energy, and then she could enjoy. And then people started saying, wow, that was a really strong performance. Yet she did half the things that she did in previous performance, meaning less tricks, less moves, less wild and crazy wow factor things, just maybe had one or two. And for someone that's very shy on the other end of the spectrum, to me, then it has to do, I can think of some people that they just maybe weren't confident in, or just weren't comfortable in their own skin. And so we began to do some of this work to let them see that what looks good on one person is not going to necessarily look the same on them, that we're all okay with looking and feeling a little different. And that is the cool thing with belly dancing, is that it's not meant to be the same on every individual, but that it actually is meant to be your own personal look, your own personal feeling. And so a lot of these exercises we started to work with, what is your feeling? What is comfortable? What feels good on your body? And hey, you know what? That's exactly what it's supposed to be. What's comfortable on your body, the way that your figure eights look may not look the same on me, but that's the joy of belly dancing. And so a lot of it became an acceptance drill and little exercises on, hey, I'm not supposed to look like this person over here. I'm supposed to look like me. And me looks pretty good. And so then you start to see that shyness and that shell break away, where then they were kind of like, hey, this is me and this is my figure eight, and I hope you like it because, well, this is what I've got. So to me, that's how you can kind of help break down either whether it's the mask of I'm going to force this emotion out there, versus, hey, I'm going to really be in this emotion, or the person who's shy that's just trying to find their own comfort and find their own joy and then share it with others.
Mhm.
I hope that wasn't a bunch of rambling and actually answered the question.
It did, but I want to dig a little deeper too. So, when you were
Yeah.
trying to get your masked student to slow down and enjoy, what
hmm
specifically did you have her do? How did you get her to
Well,
dig to that place?
well, I will tell you one thing that I learned was I had her continue to use the same piece of music for a number of different shows, so that she could look at herself and see the differences. That was one thing, because it was kind of helping to to confirm that this is what we were doing and that it was working. And so she looked at the very first piece of music where she was really busy, and then the second where she was able to slow down, and then she would see, oh, right there, oh, I did it again. I was thinking, and then I left the audience, and I was off like thinking in Never Neverland thinking and forgot they were there. And so she started recognizing it by just filming and doing the same piece of music over and over. Um, the other thing that we did is we just really often stuck with one emotion for the song. So I'd be like, okay, so we've picked this song. This is the song you decided to work on for the next few months. And why? And I just would have her explain that without moving, without any, oh, this is what I want to do. Oh, I want to use a veil. Oh, I want to do this. It was, no, why did you pick this song? Like, why did it make you feel good? Did it bring out, what emotion did it bring out? Like, you picked it for a reason. Tell me what that reason is, and then let's build off of that. And that's what I do with a lot of dancers that will come to me for privates is I'll say, okay, you picked this piece of music. Why? Answer that question, because that might answer exactly what you want to say to the audience. And then we began to take the elements and figure out and use. So she, at one point, picked this very passionate song, and it gave her some memories, and we talked about those memories. And so we pulled from some of the elements, some of those qualities, and I was like, okay, so for this song, I want you to think about these 3 qualities. That's it. I want you to think about anything else. And all the moves, whenever you think about these 3 qualities, what are the moves that come out of that? And so she would develop some moves, and then I'd say, okay, don't develop any more moves. Now let's build a dance out of only those things. And so a lot of it was actually limiting her to not add too much stuff in and just to stay with what came to her first. And it was really effective. It worked.
That's a good example. Could we dig into that level of detail for your hiding student as well?
Sure. Hold on just one second.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. Okay. So one of my students that was pretty uncomfortable in her own skin, for example, just never really wanted to show her belly, and which I don't have a problem if no one ever shows their belly. I don't really care. But so I told her, okay, first of all, if clothing or what you wear is uncomfortable, let's let go of that, and let's just focus on what makes you comfortable. So she would pick outfits and things that made her very comfortable, and then we would talk about what made her comfortable there, and were there certain songs and music, and so kind of like skirted all around the harder topic and focused on like the lighter things. And so she would just pick all those things and kind of build. And then I was like, okay, fine, pick one of these songs. Let's work with the song. And so she picked the song that she loved. And I was like, don't worry about what you're doing or, anything like that. Let's just say, what do you want to do? When you put this music on at home, what do you like to do? Because often what she would do is come and go, okay, so what should I do at this part? Like, I never know what to do at this part. And I would just put it on and basically just wouldn't answer any questions. I'd be like, all right, well, there's a ton of things you could do. And so she'd start to portray like some things that maybe she wanted to do, and we had started to work on perfecting them so that she felt that there was more direction behind it, because I feel like a lot of times what it was, she just questioned, like, well, this is what feels good on me, but is this what I should do? So, so just give her a little direction, a little refinement, but not necessarily change anything that she wanted to do. And again, just really encouraging her to start to develop it. And then also talking about bringing up, other people in her class and saying, okay, so when you see this person do, we'll go back to the figure 8. I'll just keep using that. When you see this person do a figure 8 and this person do a figure 8, it doesn't look the same, right? So it was a lot of, to be honest, comparison of other people to realize, okay, well, if you're going to look at yourself and compare yourself to other people and decide, well, that's what it should look like, make sure you're looking at everybody, because you're going to look around and see, well, none of us are looking the same. Like, none of the people in the class are doing the figure eight exactly the same. Are they executing it with the right muscles? Yes. But does it look exactly the same on every body type in class? No. So if a lot of her concern was coming from comparison of her body to other people's body. So I started saying, okay, let's go with that too, and let's figure out. So in class, she did. She paid attention. My classes are very comfortable. They're not a competition, so I don't want to make it out because she was like, oh, I do a figure eight better than someone else. It was more like, just look at what they're doing and see, do you really think everybody looks the same and you're the odd man out? Because I don't think so. And when she started realizing that, then she got more comfortable in her movements. And then using some of the ideas of, okay, so now that you're realizing it's okay that we're all going to look different, now where are you at? Like, what feels good on you? What looks good on you? If there's a move you don't like, don't use that move. Don't feel like you have to. Use the moves that you do like. So a lot of it was just basically working with them, and I say them because that scenario has probably been more the scenario I've run into in my classes than even the facade. It's often that shyness, that I'm not good enough to be on stage kind of thing. So I kind of push the people to, number one, get comfortable in their body and to realize that everybody's different, and that's great. That's the joy of belly dancing. But then to go, okay, what do you just enjoy? Because, whatever you enjoy is probably what you should use. And if you don't enjoy it, then that's okay too. That somebody else probably enjoys that move, and let them do that move, and you take these moves over here, and then start building a dance. And so basically it's that guidance into personal exception of, well, no, I was right all along. This is what felt good on me. This is what I wanted to do. And so, you know what? That's probably exactly what fits and what I'm going to do. And then coming back around to the outfits and the clothing later and saying, pick what feels good on your body. Pick what looks good on your body. Don't look at this outfit on this other person's body and think that's what everybody's got to wear. If it's not for you, it's not for you. There's certain things I definitely don't wear in my body type. They just don't look good on. And so a lot of it was, and has been for me, still is for some people that I work with, is just general realizing that we're all different. And that is what drew, I think, a lot of us into belly dancing, is that it's a dance that I feel like is for all ages, all body types, all walks of life. And then realizing that also includes that person that's maybe shy and unsure if they should be on stage, and starting to let them include themselves in that statement of, oh, okay, no, it's for me too. So it's just a lot of confidence work in saying, no, that's cool. That was really beautiful. And wherever they're questioning it, just beginning to address those areas. So if they're worried that they're not executing certain moves, then we come up with drills. If it's, how to portray a certain emotion, then we work on drilling that. Honestly, what I find people that are shy is once they break that shell, the emotion and all that truly presence just kind of follows. So.
Nice. Now, you have built a tool for some of this work. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. I have. I have a card deck, basically. I vary between calling it games or exercises, so I just call it both. But I have basically it's a deck of cards, and they're called Dancing from Within. And it's a 53 card deck that has about, I think it's 16 elemental cards and 30 chakra cards. And then also some games and some little legends to kind of explain what you're doing. But the card deck basically has 4 games that are defined. Some of them are using the elements. Some of them are using the chakras. Some of those games are used for varying and drilling your moves and varying the quality behind the movement. Some of the games and exercises are for that more exploration of the performance, like say you want to portray this. There's a game that's all about like pick 3 moves and work on this one emotion that you're trying to portray. And then one of the exercises is a lot more internal because it kind of combines the elements and the chakras, and you can kind of dig a little bit deeper if you get into that sort of path. I also, a lot of people who have bought them have come back and told me they've come up with their own games because it's kind of wide open. You can kind of use them various ways. I've even had teachers purchase them and use them in classes to help work with some of the performance techniques and even some of the drills and varying people's moves and giving different qualities to people's movements. So yeah, they're called the Dancing from Within cards, and I may be a little partial to them, but I think they're pretty cool. They were developed straight out of some workshops and some retreats that I conducted over the past, I'd say, probably the past 10 years or so. And the cool story behind them is I went to a chakra healing for myself, and this healer, she did know that I was a belly dancer. She knew I taught. She knew I performed. And during the healing, she looked at me and said, "So I see you developing this game, this something with cards." And she was like, "The way you talk, the way you use the elements and stuff, you should really use that in your classes." And I'm sitting there just kind of looking at her like, "Okay, I've done workshops and retreats on this, but you don't know that." And then she continued on, and she was like, you should develop a card game out of this." And so I went home that night, and I started looking at my workshops, and I started seeing, wow, I could actually do that. So again, it was one of those things that just kind of rolled out in front of me, and I had no plans to really do it, but someone said something, and I thought maybe I'll look into doing that, and kind of came out with these games. So I actually use them in some of my own workshops and such now.
Mhm.
So yeah.
And can you tell us about, one example of one way that people use those?
Sure. So one that's not so much on maybe the spiritual path of things would be one of the element games, where basically you pick 3 moves and you pull an element card that has a quality, and then you do that movement, or those 3 movements, I should say, those 3 movements in a combination that you just create on the spot, or you can write it down. That's all up to however that person learns best, whatever way they want to do it. And you work with those movements with that one element. So again, if we're talking about the quality of water, and we're saying that it's that soft trickle, and maybe you're doing, well, let's pick a different move so it's not just the figure 8. You're doing snake arms, and so you're doing like little snake arms, and then maybe you, or if you're working with a partner, your friend picks another element card, and maybe you pull a fire card that has something to do with power. And so maybe you change your snake arms to be more powerful. And so this game particularly is working on your movements to not always look the same. In other words, you should be able to take a movement and change its quality and change that strength, or change its intent to look different each time you use it, which then you turn around in your presentation. And if you're saying that you're trying to do a very powerful dance, then you pull out that powerful, snake arm instead of the little soft trickle snake arm. And so again, it has to do with it all comes back around to presentation in the end. But really in the game, you're just working on, how do I make my moves look different? So that's one example of one of the games.
Mm. One of the things that I love, especially about card decks, but any kind of game like this, is that there's usually an arbitrary element to it, right? You pick whatever card you pick. And I
Mm-hmm.
find that that kind of work is what really forces you to stretch and get a deeper understanding of whatever you're working with. Because when you have those limits that you didn't necessarily choose for yourself, it really
Yeah.
forces you to work outside of your habits and find ways to make it work. So, like when you were talking about that game just now, and you mentioned water, my brain. So when you started saying pick 3 moves, I said, okay, hip drops, circles, blah blah. And then you picked water. I'm like, what on earth would I do water with hip drops? And then I just had this image of like little drops plinking and falling out of the sink, right?
You
and little
do, you
ripples
do.
opening up, and it just like it gave me all kinds of ideas, and I'm just sitting on a couch.
Yeah, right.
You know, and so
It's
it's
true.
uh
It is. I mean, and that's why I say you just pick three moves, and you don't know what that quality is going to be yet, because you're
mhm,
right. You want to associate things together, when really you could be applying it to even a head slide. You
mhm.
know, so
But even,
yeah.
that's a quality of a hip drop that I haven't really thought about would be that, like,
Mhm.
drops of water. Because if I was
Yeah.
thinking, okay, what move would I use to portray drops of water, I would pick something different. And so
Right.
just by forcing my brain into that scenario and into those limitations, I went somewhere that I wouldn't ordinarily go, even if I thought I was being creative, if that makes sense.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think it is. It is kind of it to me it's also very similar to, if we want to apply it back to learning someone else's choreography. They might even use moves that you haven't used in years and years. So then this does stretch the brain, because you're not going to just do what you always do. You're going to take this thing and go, "Oh, I got to figure this out because I didn't expect that one to come up." But yeah, yes, I agree. I agree. And that's
Hmm.
when I said earlier about, in my viewing, the elements show up everywhere. So they're not necessarily stuck in one place. You're not fire does not always associate with a drum solo. A drum solo can be very sensual. And yet a sensual dance can have a little fire, and that can be pretty sexy. So I mean, when you start playing with it like that, we start breaking the barriers of that expectation that always has to be the same, and we come up with some other creative ideas, and then we start to get excited, and then hopefully we start throwing off the mask and throwing out all that shyness, and saying, now I want to bring this excitement to the stage, and you guys out in the audience watching me, I want you to enjoy this excitement too. So,
Hmm. And if people would like a set of your cards, where can they get them?
well, they can get them from me. They can email or message me on Facebook or email me, and I just put an invoice together and bill them, and then I put them in a little envelope and mail them to their house.
All right. And what email address should they use?
It's Phoenix, Phoenix underscore dancing, DANCING, at hotmail.com. And that's also on my website that you listed earlier.
Awesome. So we are going to open it up for questions and answers in just a sec. But before we get
Sure.
there, if people take one thing away from this call, what would you want that to be?
Let's see. Um, well, I think one of the biggest things that I would love for people to take away is to evaluate your dance at a level that's more than, did I just do this right? And, oh, I just messed up, and, or whatever all those questions are that come up. And instead, look more at what you're really offering to the audience. Like, what was your intent? Again, why did you pick out that song? Why did you choose to use a veil? What was it that inside made you want to do that? And then come back and look at your face, look at your muscle strength or weakness, whatever it might be, and see, is all of that really matching? Like, did we match all these things up? We always worry about matching our costume to our music and all that appropriateness. You want your costume to match your music and to match, what it is that you're doing. But also, does your face match that? And does your energy and your intent? And start looking at more than just your technique and your dancing. Still very important. I don't want to downplay that at all. But try to look at that concept of, are you just doing fancy tricks, or are you really going out there and giving them what made you so excited to do this piece in the first place? And start evaluating things a little different. But that would
Mhm.
probably be the biggest thing I'd want them to take away.
All right. And we've talked about where to get the cards, but if people want to learn from you in other ways, how can they do that?
Well, I offer workshops, and I offer workshops on stage presence, and like I said, I even use my own cards in my workshops, and I do also offer even coaching online. I've done that where we've done some Skype sessions. And yeah, so you can have me out. You can order the cards, or you can come to one of my classes, or anytime. I do travel and teach at times. You can always keep up with those by getting on my newsletter. So.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like if somebody wants to sponsor you, they can bring you over. Is that right?
I am completely open to being sponsored.
All right. So
Yes,
even if
I would
you're
love
not
that.
in Colorado, bring
Right.
your app.
I am more than willing to leave Colorado and come to you if you would like that.
Awesome. All right. So we're going to
And
open
I'm
it up for.
totally serious all the time in case people can't tell.
All right, so we are going to open it up to questions and answers. So if there's anybody who's just listening to the webcast and you want to type in a question, you can do that by clicking on the little speech bubble on the right-hand side of your screen. If you're on the phone, you can press star star to unmute yourself. And if you're on Skype, you can press star star, but that needs to happen on your Skype keypad. We would love to hear from you, so if you have any questions or if you want to share your favorite takeaway, we would love to hear it. This is the part where we wait for the first person to be brave. I'm always tempted to edit these pauses, and I never do. All right, so we've got a caller who's showing up as coming from Fresno, but that just might be Skype. Hi there. Hey, I see that you're unmuted, but we can't hear you yet. Is there any chance that your phone is on mute?
I just turned it off mute. Can you hear me now?
Yes, awesome.
Okay, I'm actually calling from Grand Junction, Colorado, over on the hay side of the mountains. So just wanted to say thank you. That was really an amazing talk and just kind of really crystallized a bunch of things that I've kind of been thinking about but didn't know there were words to express it. So thanks, Phoenix.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. Thank you. I love that.
All right, thanks a lot. So I'm going to go ahead and mute you again. But if anybody has any other questions or things they want to share, we would love to hear it. One more time, that's star star. You can talk about your personal challenges or difficulties you've had with your students around this area. Hey there.
Hi, I got a question. I really liked what you had to say about if you don't want to go into the spirituality of it, and you just want to focus on trying to use it as a tool. I kind of have had that experience with some other programs. I had that experience with Alya Thabit's 90-day dance challenge, where I went into it and I really didn't think all those spiritual things that she described were going to happen. I was really doing it just to create a dance habit. And instead I had all this emotional kind of upheaval that she had predicted was going to happen. So I guess my question is, can you expand on how somebody who doesn't really want to take it into a spiritual direction can use that in their dance?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and I won't fib to you and say that I wouldn't promise that a similar thing wouldn't happen if you got into it. But for example, the first game or the game that I was talking about, so say you just want to vary your movements and you're like, so when I do my snake arms or my figure eight or my hip circle or whatever the movements are, my hip drops, whatever, they always kind of look the same, even though I'm supposed to be doing a drum solo, and then later I was doing this soft dance. Does my hip drop or does my figure eight or my snake arms, do they look, they don't really vary much, and I want to learn how to vary those. So you could take the elements and start to work with that intent of movement. It's not necessarily an intent of a spiritual path, but it's like there's quality to each element, and those qualities can be that playfulness, power, versus soft flowing, sensuality, so when you start saying those words, they're not the same. And so hopefully when you're working with that, then you would start to think, how would I make my snake arms, my rib circle, whatever that move was, be like a soft movement or a sensual movement versus a powerful movement? And, could it be the speed? Could it be the force in the muscle that you're using? Could it be the size of the movement to start to vary the movement? With the affirmation statements, if you're trying to say something and you find, this might be where you literally dig through the deck and you're not pulling it out by chance. You might be like, I'm going to find something that makes this statement. And those are one of those things that they're used, those kind of techniques of affirmation statements are not just used in spiritual paths, but even in someone who's maybe learning to do presentations in, say, the IT industry, might start to learn to do some of these affirmation statements and make these things before they walk up in front of an audience. So it's not really like necessarily a religious or a spiritual path, but yet again, it does work on the brain. Whether we want to face it or not, So in those ways, you can kind of use some of these games or exercises, whatever you would like to word them as, not necessarily in a meditational or spiritual way, but in a way that just makes your technique and your presentation more solid or has more intent that maybe that you were looking for.
Gotcha.
Does that help a little?
I had a question about, you mentioned color. Can you, is there like a list of, do the colors have meaning, or how does color relate to it?
Elements a lot of times have, even chakras have colors associated with them. And like fire, you immediately probably think orange or red is often associated. Earth, green or brown. If you look online, you can find that colors are associated with various elements. For some people, colors bring out certain feelings, whether that's comfort or even rage. So here's a little funny fact. It sounds like I'm veering from it, but I'm really not. Victoria's Secret, the colors that store actually puts in there is actually intended to make women comfortable but men uncomfortable. So when you start talking about the use of color, it can kind of affect us in different ways. And it might not affect people at all. It just kind of depends on kind of where you're at, at that moment even. It might affect you more at one point than the other. But for example, when you're looking at the colors associated with the chakras, the heart chakra has the color green, and the root chakra has the color red. So those color associations, for some people, color talks, and for some people, stones or crystals are more what they associate with. For some people, words are more what they associate with. The funny thing is that's me. It's like I am very metaphysical and I am into this, but words actually are what speak more to me than even the color and the crystals. And that's why I went this way with the card deck and then what I do in workshops and such.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. And if it's okay, I'd like to jump in for a second to talk about the spiritual, if it's not your path piece of it. So the reason why is very complicated, but I'm pretty familiar with a lot of New Age practices, even though I don't believe in most of them myself. Total respect for everybody who believes that, but a lot of them are not my path. And one thing that I've found when I'm working with somebody who does take that tack, especially if that's a kind of a core piece of their teaching, is to imagine it almost like interact with it like fiction that I'm really enjoying and really into. So like I read fantasy novels, right? And so if somebody gives me, the affirmation, the goddess is flowing through me to bless the audience, for some dancers, that's going to be something that they try to believe literally because that's a piece of their path. For other people, they're going to believe that figuratively in the sense of, the divine in the universe is in all of us. And for other people, that's going to be, you know what? In this book that I'm reading, where this dancer is able to channel this divine force through herself and bless the audience, that's freaking amazing. And I really enjoy thinking about that. So I'm going to put myself in that place, even though I'm not personally believing that there's anything literally in that tack. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does.
And so I feel like, instead of saying, "Oh, that's not my thing," I can still get a lot of benefit out of taking it in whatever context or whatever angle feels comfortable for me and where I can get the most benefit from it. And then, sometimes you start to believe those things if you find the benefit from it, and sometimes you don't. And so, like, just being open to it in whatever way you're comfortable being open to it, like you experienced with the challenge, it just goes great.
That was pretty intense, because I'm like, that's not going to happen to me. That's never going to happen to me. That's just silly. Oh, but then it started happening. so yeah, it's not sometimes not something you choose. It's just something that occurs.
Mm-hmm.
And I do agree. I think it can. I do. I think that sometimes we surprise ourselves what's hidden, and sometimes we can accidentally tap into things, and it sounds like that might have happened for you.
You're right.
So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Treasure. Was there anything else you wanted to ask or say while you're at it?
No, just tell me how to remute myself.
I will mute you, but I'm pretty sure it's just star, but I'll do it for you.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Well, I think that is it for today. Thank you so much, Phoenix.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and thank you guys for listening in.
Awesome. So this is the end of our call, but that doesn't mean that the conversation has to end. We've got a private Facebook group just for Clubhouse members. So if you would like to continue the conversation, you can head over there. I will send out an email shortly that will have an invitation. There is an approval delay because we have to make sure that you're a dancer and not a creepy person. So if you can't post right away, don't worry about it. That email will also include a link to the call recording, so you can listen again if you would like, as well as a link to Phoenix's website and information on how you can get the cards. We'll also include a link to our feedback survey. So if you'd like to suggest any topics or speakers or improvements, we would love that. I do have to tell you that we have guests booked for almost a year ahead at this point. So we're going to be a little slow to take on new topics, but we are very interested in what you're interested in. And our next call is not scheduled yet, but I will let you know soon. So keep an eye on your inbox. To let you know what's going on in the Belly Dance Geek world, we are about to start the Painless Morning Practice Challenge. If you are in the US or another country that's doing daylight savings time changes soon, then you have a once-a-year opportunity to add in some morning practice without having to get used to waking up earlier. So we're going to be doing an online challenge with daily assistance and check-ins to help you use that time to make time for practice. That is not up yet, but we'll have the details soon at bellydancegeek.com/morning-challenge, and we'll have at least a sign up so you can get the details ASAP. That is it for tonight. So until next time, happy dancing. Good night, everybody.
Great, thank you.
Thanks for listening. For more geek-tacular resources, visit bellydancegeek.com.